Hello and welcome to 60 Minutes Nigeria. I'm Uyi Agmofegbe. We're live in Benin City, Nigeria. It's been an interesting week. A whole lot has happened. However, this week we want to turn to two of those very key issues highlighted in the course of the week, especially from the standpoint of the government and what is happening on the front of governance as it stands right now. Just on Tuesday, 2 days ago, the President, Muhammadu Buhari, sent a bill, the Finance Bill 2021, to the National Assembly, both chambers, Senate and the House of Representatives. The President says, amongst several other things, this bill will help galvanize the implementation of the 2022 appropriation, that is the 2022 budget as we know it. He talks about, for example, how that this bill will help to mop up revenue and they help to straighten up issues around taxation, whether it is local or international, even excise duty, for example. Of course, as usual, the Senate and the House of Representatives will have to do due diligence, allow the bill to go the whole hog, and then ultimately return it to the President for assent. The question is this the first time we will see a bill such as this one? Of course, for the immediate benefits, the President makes it clear that it will help to bring value as far as the 2022 appropriation is concerned. How much of difference will this piece of legislation ultimately make beyond the impacts it is hoped it will have on the 2022 appropriation? What exactly should be the standard practice with this one, and how does it eventually benefit Nigerians? Those are some of the issues we want to look at today. And then the follow-up issue we want to also discuss is the Abacha loots, the processes associated with the return of these loots, the way it's deployed, for example, the monitoring process, issues around accountability and transparency. They are very vital. For instance, we understand that even though the government has always proposed and talked about how that they would spend the money, in recent years, the international community has become more interested. Switzerland, US, the UK, for example, are now sticking their eyes, their ears, and their nose to the ground to be sure that they follow through with the way we get to utilize these monies. And then we also have local civil society organizations on the ground. I mean, civil society organizations here in Nigeria who are also interested in how much of benefits Nigerians ultimately derive from this loot recovery. Recall that every time the government complains about being cash-strapped, a good number of Nigerians would say, what have we done with the Abacha loot, for example? What have we done with recoveries coming through the EFCC and the ICPC, for instance? Some persons have joked and said, look, Abacha is the only human being, as far as the world history goes, who is dead but continues to send credits from the grave. I mean, some people say that on the softer side, but the fact of the matter remains that we've seen series of recoveries coming on account of the Abacha loots. Has it benefited Nigerians? Will it ever benefit Nigerians? In what specific ways? We've seen one of the most recent being talked about as to how it will be spent on things like infrastructure, road, railway, and basic amenity, and so on and so forth. Have we seen any progress along those lines? Can we put our fingers on specifics as far as those issues are concerned? Those are some of the things I want to look at. But quickly, we're taking a break. We'll return in a minute, and then you'll meet my guest. Thank you for staying with us. I'm joined by Christopher Ojekiri, is a policy analyst here to help us find how much of sense there is in these two conversations we're having on the program this afternoon. Chris, thank you for coming on 60 Minutes Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, viewers.
I want us to start from the very beginning, which is the Finance Bill 2021. Some persons believe, for whatever reasons best not on them, that this is if done properly, a game changer as far as our budgetary process, right from that conception to implementation, is concerned. Do you see it from that standpoint?
Well, I don't want to be pessimistic.
Okay.
But I also do not see much ground for such optimism that it's a complete game changer. Whatever would always be a game changer would be implementation of any policy. It is not in the draft of the policy, neither is it in the framing. It is in the implementation that will be a game changer. Basically, the finance bill is not at the implementation end. It's actually at the generating end. It's a legal framework that empowers governments to be able to do reforms in the financial sector, especially with respect to tax and domestic revenue generation. So that's why I say I cannot see the ground for such optimism, except in the implementation. What it means, however, is that the government will not have the legal backing to be able, our powers, to be able to do institutional reforms that would help it track more of its funding, that is revenue generation within domestic revenue generation. It will also help it to provide the legal reform for the present automation that is going on in the Federal Inland Revenue System. Okay. This is what the bill is basically meant for. So there's going to be reform in custom duties, in excise duties, in all other forms of domestic income generation. There's also going to be reform in tax administration and tax management. And then there will be reform in both local tax management, and then there's a new innovation, a new introduction. The government will now be able to put a hang on persons who are living outside of Nigeria but who do business in Nigeria. They make profit from Nigeria, but they will not be paying taxes hitherto. The case of Twitter comes to mind now, who makes money from Nigeria and has so much followers from Nigeria, but the government have not been able to benefit as much from taxing it. So this whole framework, it's a legal framework that will empower government to do that. And then it will also empower government in the execution. That's why they say it will support the 2022 budget. It will help government because, you see, monies are appropriated, how those monies move within the system with respect to implementability, with respect to putting those money to the budget heads that they were planned for, with respect to the tracking, what we call the performance of the budget. Government now has more legal power to be able to track it and to be able to ensure that money is properly disbursed and distributed, and then there is a mechanism for checking how it goes and how much is spent and all that. So it is more of government's instrument for government. Now we begin to talk about it being a game changer if in the implementation government is serious and transparent and accountable, not just to itself, but other organs of government like the National Assembly, and then the civil society, and other watchers of government spending, policy analysts and all other watchers of government spending. Now, it is those people that will report at the end of the day whether this reform and this policy reform has actually helped the Nigerian society or helped the economy or not. If not, it is just at the stage of framing. Now, the National Assembly has not even passed it. We are hoping that they will do so, because it looks like a win-win situation, for everybody, if properly, implemented. So I think that's the stage that we are in now.
Over the years, we've talked about constraints with revenue generation, especially in light of our budgetary cycle. Given the issues that the president has clearly laid out in this Finance Bill 2021, is there ground? Is there basis to believe that we are going to be able to substantially jack up revenue this time, given all of the loopholes he has identified and also recommended solutions to?
Yes, if it's properly implemented, because now I remember the tax officers, the national tax officers, especially head of the FIRS, have said repeatedly, and even in the States, they have said repeatedly that the problem is not that Nigerians, don't have enough taxable adults or enough taxable businesses, but that you have only about, I remember Fowler saying, only about 20% of taxable Nigerians, and most of them of these big blue chips companies that are within the tax nets. And so the revenue loss is that you don't have the people who should be paying taxes. And that's because you've had a lot of sharp practices between the tax agencies and these big companies who do a lot of sharp practices, and then instead of them to pay the taxes to government bosses, they do sharp practices with the tax agencies, and then, you just have all this revenue loss. Now, if you have a legal framework in place, government has the power to be able to demand certain documents, to be able to demand certain, what do you call it? They call it declaration. Certain declarations. And they'll be able to check whether X YZ are actually paying tax according to the profits declared, either publicly or by investigation. So the legal framework is going to do that. It will also be able to check without people complaining of their fundamental human rights being infringed upon. You don't have a legal framework. Government will be able to check a lot of people who are outside the tax net and drag them in. So it's going to help generate revenue if it is properly. That's why I say it is the implementation that will eventually tell. Because what government is just looking for is the power. Now, when you come to government agencies, custom, excise, cabotage, and all of that come in as taxes to federal government posts, the FIROS, and the big elephant, which is the NNPC and all of that. Now, if government is transparent and government will follow its own laws and policies that is putting in place, a lot of leakages will be blocked in those areas, and then government will be able to make a lot of money from there. So there's that outlook if government implements properly. Yes.
If you look back today, you remember that we once had, just about 4 years ago, the voluntary tax policy that was introduced by government, which of course the vice president had talked about, so glowingly, and of course he had hoped it would also bring about certain level of reforms. So can we at this point say, if all goes well with the Finance Bill 2021, it will become much easier going forward every other year afterwards to be able to to galvanize revenue for implementation of the budget?
Yes. If implementation is properly put in place, if it is properly sustained, because it will only, the bill will only become more prolific in the sense that as it starts to operate, it will reveal areas where it needs amendments.
So we continue to tweak
it and continue to amend it. And that continues to help us with the revenue generation and the system of, protecting the revenue that is, generated.
Okay.